Americans for Limited Government podcast. I am Frank McCaffrey. We are pleading with you to please subscribe to this page. There you see it. Look, please subscribe. Fancy logo I have hanging over my head. We've got a lot going on here. I'm joined by ALG President Rick Manning. And Rick, we're going to start with how the jobs report has not been made sick by the coronavirus. Is that correct?
Oh, wow, the jobs report was a slam dunk today. But first of all, I want to apologize. I did run a brush through my hair this morning. It just doesn't look that way. I don't know why. But nonetheless, yes, the jobs report was a slam dunk. It was, we saw 273,000 jobs created. We see the unemployment rate still 3.5%. We see another 80,000. The upward estimates from both December and January added another 80,000 jobs that have been created. This is as good as it gets in terms of a jobs report. And for those who are worried about the coronavirus, you know, one of the interesting things is the data that came out yesterday, which is the unemployment insurance claims. Department of Labor tracks that on a weekly basis how many unemployment insurance claims are coming in across the nation. It's reported by the state unemployment offices in every state in the nation. And the unemployment insurance claims actually, on a 4-week rolling average, are lower than they were a year ago. They are slightly bumped up from the week before, but the week before in January, there were a couple weeks where it was just unheard of low in terms of unemployment insurance claims. So we're well below the all reasonable averages. It doesn't appear to have an upward trend line. And so we really haven't seen a layoff effect from coronavirus, at least through the month of February. And that's good news. It means there hasn't been a lot of attack on our economy as a result, or a lot of impact on our economy. And the fact that we have 273,000 more people employed, more jobs created, is an enormous number. All the experts were expecting the number to be in the 150s. Of course, that number slightly is impacted a little bit because you've got the Census Bureau hiring for the decennial census, which is, adds 50,000 jobs for the last month. You've got so you've got some of that kind of hiring, which is skewing it upwards. But everybody knew about that hiring, and they cooked it into their books also. So private sector hiring is still at a phenomenal pace, and that's good news. That's good news for America. What's more, wages went up by 3% year over year, which is a great number, because inflation still remains below that amount, which means people are getting a real wage increase and not just an ephemeral one that looks good in the paycheck, but the cost for buying stuff has either kept even or outpaced the more money you get in your paycheck. So it's a real wage increase, and 3% year over year is a good number. It's been pretty much around the number that we've had for the last 18 months or so. And this economy continues to hum along. So that's really good news. The news in the job report today was extraordinary.
All right. Now, also, coronavirus, it's still creating a little bit of a panic in the market, but it's not doing the type of damage that was predicted. I was calling it a few weeks ago. It's just going to be like a blip on the radar. These things happen from time to time. The market always survives. Look at history. The market has survived just about it. It has survived everything. I shouldn't say just about it. It has survived everything.
It has survived everything, and it'll survive this. We don't know what it'll look like at the end of it, but it will survive it. The one thing we know is there's a couple things we know. We know that what we're really looking at this point is just over a 10% drop in the market and the S&P and the S&P.
Yeah.
So you're looking at about a 10% drop. A real correction, you get corrections that go down as low as 20%, double this. The reason it seems like it's so much is because the market is so high. It's at such an unheard of level, nearing almost 30,000 at the beginning of this. It was up at 29,000 at the beginning of this. It's at such a high level that retracted 2,900 points. Well, when Donald Trump took office, it was at 18,000. That's where the number was at. So we're still way above the number when Donald Trump came into office. And you can expect in just the normal ups and downs of the market, 10, 15% contractions, and then booms that go beyond that when the market resets. And that's a little bit of what we've experienced. Now, the coronavirus is unique because you can't look at charts and all those kind of normal things, because it all is going to be based upon people reacting to what they think is going to happen with the coronavirus. The one aspect of this that is true, if you bought bonds, if you were buying bonds, government bonds, or other private sector private bonds over the last few years, and you've been holding on to them, you've been sitting there saying these things never do any good.
Yeah.
Today you are a happy person.
Yeah.
Your bonds are worth a lot more. The interest payment is still the same, but the way bonds work in terms of, for those who don't know, bonds you get a regular payment. You're lending the company money, you're lending the government money, and you're getting paid a percentage rate for lending that money to the government. And at the end, when the bond expires, you get your money back. The bond goes dead, and you get your money back, and you've made a certain interest rate off of it. So the reason the price of your bond, purchasing your bond, goes up when interest rates go down is because a bond, let's say, is hypothetically a 5% bond. So you're getting paid 5% yield on your bond. And if people can buy, that becomes very, very popular when bonds, the government's selling bonds for less than 5%, because you can make more money by buying your bond on the aftermarket than you can buy by buying a government bond or a corporate bond on the regular market. And so your bond that you hold becomes more valuable. Well, with the drop in interest rates that we've seen, the 10-year treasuries are down at about 0.75%.
That's ridiculous.
So 0.75% is what the 10-year treasury is. Until this week, 10-year treasuries had never been below 1%. So this is record territory where they are in terms of record low. So if you happen to own a 10-year treasury that had paid 2%, your 10-year treasury with 2% is now worth more money than what you paid for it. And on the aftermarket, people would pay you more. You would make a profit on it if you sold it on the aftermarket. And so if you own bonds, that's good. Second thing, the 10-year treasuries, this has an impact on things like our national debt, because about $500 million, $500 million of our money goes to pay interest rates on the bonds and that are sold by the federal government. So if the federal government now has the opportunity to sell a lot of bonds, a lot of paper, a lot of the debt for a very, very low cost, that means the interest payments on that debt will go down, and will help make it so the interest payments on the debt don't have as negative of an impact on our overall budget as they would have otherwise. And so the logical thing to do for the Treasury Department is to try to reissue as much debt as possible. If you're going to do 10-year, 30-year, or even create a 50-year bond, create as much debt as sell as much debt as possible on the market into this plummeting market, fulfill the demand for the world demand for U.S. Treasuries, and essentially refinance the U.S. as much of the U.S. government's debt as we can, in order to pay lower interest payments and save taxpayer money downstream in terms of how much money we have to pay to service the debt. So that's a good thing. What also is a good thing is the mortgage rates are dropping and have dropped. They're dropped to record low levels, which means that some people in our economy who own homes should be able to refinance those homes and be able to save some money on their mortgage payments. And in refinancing their homes and saving money on their mortgage payments, they're effectively giving themselves a pay raise. Because if you don't have to spend, if you're spending $1,500 a month in mortgage, and now you only have to spend $1,400 a month in mortgage, you save $100. and you can put that $100 to work. You can put that $100 into your savings account. You can put it into your investment accounts. You can put that $100 to work by subscribing to every single streaming service you want to. It doesn't really matter. You're gonna, whatever you do with that extra $100, it's not just sitting dormant in a bank. It's going to be spent into the economy one way or the other, and as a result, you win. You've effectively got money out of this deal. So when we look at this entirety of the stock market dropping, the one thing that's happening is the stock market's dropping, but the people are taking their money out of the stock market. They're not putting it under a mattress. They're buying U.S. Treasuries, and by buying U.S. Treasuries, they're dropping the bond yield, and that gives you an opportunity as a citizen to refinance your mortgage and be able to save some money in terms of your pocket, and just close your eyes in terms of what's happening in your stock portfolio. It'll all be okay. But take advantage of what's happening on the bond side, because that's an opportunity for you to put some money in your pocket by refinancing. I'm not in the refinance industry. I'm not in the mortgage industry. I just know that if you can if you can save yourself $100 a month on your mortgage, it's $100 you wouldn't have had, and it's the equivalent of getting a tax cut. So might as well take advantage of it while it's here. It's one of the benefits of this massive drop in bond rates.
Okay, now, what does this mean for the national debt, though? Does this somehow make it so this massive amount of money that we now have as a national debt, is there something that we can turn into positive about these very low rates?
The national debt, we spent about, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's a little under $500 billion a year in debt service. About 40% of that is sold to countries like China and others, and is money we pay out to them, banks, and anybody who owns our treasury bills and the like. And about 60% of it goes to Social Security, Medicare, because Social Security and Medicare buy our government debt. And then they get the interest payments on that debt. And as a result of getting those interest payments, that's how Social Security and Medicare funds grow. And they have to grow to meet the needs of the recipients, actually. So what does that mean? It means that if the government is able to refinance the debt and lower the payments that they're having to make on the debt that they're having to put out on the marketplace, they're able to flood the marketplace with U.S. debt right now, then we're going to end up paying less money out in interest payments on the debt, meaning, very simply, that you might have a 20, 30, $50 billion drop. If you have a $10 billion drop in the amount of interest payments we're paying on the debt, that's the equivalent of cutting $10 billion out of the federal budget. So yeah, it does have an impact. And recognizing we're borrowing an extra $1 trillion a year this year, which may offset, this may drop in interest rates, may simply offset the additional interest payments that we have to pay for the additional borrowing we're doing. So right now, while interest payments are super low, I'm confident that the Treasury Department is looking at how to get as much paper onto the market as possible, as much of our debt for sale as possible, to lock in the lowest possible rates for the longest possible term. And that's one of the advantages of having this huge drop in on bond rates, because it allows you to refinance your debt. The U.S. can do the same thing that homeowners you can do. Refinance their debt and create an environment where we are in fact creating a cushion, a interest rate cushion, interest payment cushion that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And hopefully we don't spend that, but we instead use it to try to bring ourselves into some fiscal discipline. So, heaven forbid, we actually try to cut the size and scope of government and create an environment where we're not spending $1 trillion more than we're bringing in. Of course, there's little hope of us actually doing that because the government loves to spend money, but we keep fighting for that, and it's time for the American public to say, we're going to get some benefits of the federal government now, we're going to see the we're all rooting for the CDC to do the right thing. We're all hoping that we're going to see the government doing a variety of things to mitigate the costs and the challenges of this coronavirus. But there's a lot of things that the federal government is doing that they don't need to be doing. And the Congress should be looking at those things and cutting down to spend the extra supplemental money that's needed to meet the crisis of the coronavirus. I have little expectation that they will do that, but they should be, and that's one of the things that it's that you and I, as viewers, we should be asking the question, well, what are you cutting to pay for this?
Yeah, that would be a nice thing. We did see Trump recently say he was going to address the spending, which is good news. That is something that's very good news for a lot of people.
The challenge is Trump can't address the spending. He wanted about a quarter of the amount of money that the Congress decided they're going to put into the coronavirus issue. And the reason the president asked for about $2.3 billion rather than the $8+ billion that they allocated is because there's only so much money you can cram in the system effectively, and and so there's just, like I say, there's only so much money you can cram in the system effectively. The president will spend whatever it takes to deal with this coronavirus issue. The challenge is if in spending that money we create permanent spending rather than temporary spending. This is one-time only spending that it's fine, it's a good deal, we should do it. But if it creates permanent bureaucracies and permanent spending that we have to do year after year after year and continue to pay for it, that becomes a disaster. So we'll be monitoring that in terms of how the money's being spent. But we do, every single one of us wants the government to run efficiently and to do what's necessary to make certain that this coronavirus doesn't become what people are fearfully looking at and be something that has a cost of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives.
Oh man, could you imagine? Well, so far we've had about a dozen lives lost in America. I'm of the belief that it's being overblown, that it's being exaggerated, and that it goes away by mid-spring. But I'm not the expert here, though. I'm not the expert.
As we discussed yesterday, we know that flus tend to go away in the spring. That flu season ends in April for a reason. It gets warmer. So there's great hope that by the fact that this president took immediate action, cut flights from China, the infected area, immediately, and delayed the arrival of the coronavirus in a meaningful way into our country until a couple weeks ago. And he effectively set the exponential growth back a full month by doing that, and that's where you really end up with your problems. Is when you get the exponential growth with all the burdens on the system and with people being severely ill. But by cutting it by a month and before flu season, you create an environment where nature can effectively take care of this virus and make it so far fewer end up being either getting it or becoming gravely ill from it and dying. So that's just basic flu season stuff, and nobody knows if this virus is going to behave the way other flu viruses have, but it's reasonable to assume that it would unless we're told otherwise.
Okay, now Rick, real quick, I'm looking down at the polls. It looks like Sanders could do well in a couple states coming up in the primaries, but Biden, they got Michigan coming up. Biden right now is 5% over Trump, according to Real Clear Politics, which I always check out. And a lot of that is in California, but he's over a percentage point up on Trump in Florida, which really, really counts. Why is Biden polling so well up against Trump when Trump has performed so well, and most people think of Biden as being some guy who's not really all there anymore?
That's a great question. I think that there is the Democrats had a rally around the flag effect for Biden because of the impeachment and the fact that Biden was a lot of Biden and his sons illicit activity and corrupt activity that occurred with the Ukraine became a big prime subject on in terms of the impeachment. And so the Democrats probably had a rally around the flag effect with Biden, and in terms of trying to protect their guy. They're going to have to come to grips with the fact that Joe Biden is. I don't think he's. It does not appear as though he is mentally capable of being president, and as a result, and I just it's not gaffes anymore. This is just stuff like thinking he's running for the Senate.
Yeah,
I think he's running. It's just he's not. And over a course of 6 months, 8 month more campaign, Biden will have to stand on stages. He'll have to talk to a lot of people, and he's going to have to deal with his people running his campaign are going to have to deal with the fact that every single time he speaks in front of an audience, he's likely to say something wacky.
He said some horrible things in front of the audience. But Rick, I wanted to point out the people who are saying that Biden is not all there are Democrats. The Sanders supporters are saying they are sabotaging us. They're sabotaging our guy, Bernie Sanders, to give you Joe Biden, who does not function properly upstairs. And I don't think he's functioned properly upstairs for a long time, to be quite honest with you. If you remember years ago when he used the line that they're going to put you back in chains. I mean, you can't say stuff like that.
Well, he's always been a gaffe machine. Now I thought for a long time that his family was doing him a tremendous disservice by allowing him to continue in the campaign because his legacy was being impacted. Of course, his legacy has always been wrong, but that's a different thing. Now he's the Democrats have rallied around him. The questions could be who's he going to pick as a VP, and he will be. But once again, taking him for granted as the nominee, I think, is unfair. Also. There are two states that are coming up, Missouri and Michigan. Both are very tight. Remember, Hillary did not think that she would lose to Bernie in Michigan.
That's right.
She did.
Yeah, I remember that well.
Similarly, in Missouri, it's also very tight. And so Bernie Sanders happens to win those two states on Tuesday. It's upcoming Tuesday. People are going to be. It changes the entire narrative. The question is, it's going to come down to a very simple question in terms of Joe Biden. He's going to have to answer for things he's done in the past, and he's going to have to answer for whether he's capable of running the country in the future. And Bernie's going to play both of those cards, and it's just going to be a really, really interesting situation because the Bernie Bros, the so-called Bernie Bros, the followers of Bernie, are not going to give up easily because they believe they had the nomination won, and it will carry them forward all the way to Milwaukee, where it's gonna where they feel as though they've been treated fairly or the nominations have been stolen from them in some way, shape, or form. The Milwaukee convention for the Democrats is not going to be a pleasant experience for anyone.
All right, I know the Sanders supporters well. I've had many of them refer to me as a fascist.
They're all, they're very kind and genteel and tolerant. They're the tolerant class. The irony of this is Joe Biden. Here's why this matters. What Joe Biden should be able to do and should do to win is he needs to move toward the center and reestablish himself as being in favor of the working man. But because of the Bernie Sanders race, he's going to have to persist in talking about things like eliminating hydraulic fracturing, which is terrible news for him when he talks about trying to win in Pennsylvania. It's terrible news for him in Ohio. It's terrible news for him in Michigan. So it's getting rid of all the Green New Deal stuff, getting rid of the internal combustion engine. I don't know how you win Wisconsin when you're anti-dairy cow and you need to get rid of dairy cows to deal with the new Green Deal. So he's got this problem. He's going to have to, as long as Bernie's there, he's not going to be able to pretend to be in the middle. He's going to have to embrace some of the most radical concepts our nation has ever heard, and he's going to embrace them, and then he's going to have to be winking on one side and say, "Oh, I really don't mean it." And if you really don't mean it, it's not going to, it doesn't do you any good politically. So he's going to have to convince, in order to have some kind of level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, not C-O-M-E-D-Y, at their convention, he's going to have to embrace those things pretty heavily, and that doesn't allow him any room to move towards the center, because he will have been in favor of eliminating millions of jobs, and given his history with China, not only eliminating those jobs, but shifting overseas to China. So it's going to be a race between the president and Biden is a different race than a race between the president and Bernie. But both are going to come down to, do you want China to have her jobs, or do you want us to continue to fight for America first? And I believe ultimately the president is going to win that discussion, and he will win that discussion overwhelmingly, no matter who the Democrats nominate.
Yeah, Trump was recently quoted as saying he assumes he's going to get reelected, but if not, you probably just won't see him anymore. He'll be out golfing somewhere. I don't know if I buy that. I think Donald Trump loves Donald Trump, and he wants to get his name and his face out there and his ideas out there. But hey, maybe that's what he's saying. Hey, you can vote against me, but you won't have my good performance. And so I'll be out golfing and watching from afar while the country goes down.
It's actually, I will tell you, Donald Trump is essentially saying something different than I think you heard. I think what my interpretation of what he said is, President Barack Obama parked himself on Colorado Boulevard here in D.C., breaking all precedents of presidents going away after they cease being president. We've had an ongoing coup d'etat going on against the President Trump, and him even being able to get his own people in the administration and people trying to take him down from day one. What he's actually saying is, I'm not going to do that to my successor, whether it be this year or 4 years from now. When I'm out, it's no longer my job, somebody else's responsibility. I'm not going to be sitting there kibitzing with them every single step of the way and trying to block policy. I'll let the American people decide. The American people decide. So I think he's really setting the stage and setting a contrast between what happened, where the Hillary people and the Obama people just basically would not give up and disrupted the country over a period of 3 years, trying to overturn the results of an election. He's saying he's not going to do that. I think that's right. I think it's wise, but I've never seen him work harder in terms of his campaign, and he's clearly working hard to win again in 2020, with an eye towards 2020, his term ending in January 20th, 2025, and making the changes he wants to make to protect American interests around the world, and to put his stamp, his long-term indelible stamp on things like the judiciary, our global trade agreements, and our economy in such a way that the next his successor will be in a totally different place than he was. It'll be a much better place economically and and globally. And with that, that's what he hopes to do. And when he's done, he said he's going to go play golf. Well, good for him. That's great. I'm just hoping he's not done until 2025.
Yeah, and that does seem likely. It's going to take a little bit of work, because right off the bat, the Democrats are polling well against him. But I do think at the end of the day, we're going to have what our friends at Latinos for Trump told us, that there's going to be a lot of people who publicly say they're going to vote against Trump, but once they get into the voting booth, they're going to say, okay, we got to vote for the guy. He's done a good job. We don't want to change that.
Anybody who was involved in 2016 knows that the polls always skew to between 2 to 6 points against Trump, because people either don't say they're going to support Trump, or they don't get polled because the pollsters still don't know how to figure out how to poll a Trump voter. If you look at the Trump rallies typically have about 25% Democrats in them, about 17% unregistered voters there. And so it tells you that this president, he has the capacity to go out. There's a large number of people who would support him who weren't registered to vote, which means people who support Trump should be going out and doing voter registration drives. And secondly, associated with his name. And secondly, a large number of Democrats, even though this doesn't show up in the polls, a large number of people who register Democrat are in fact Trump supporters, and that destroys the narrative of a new kind of a monolith Democratic Party against a monolith Republican Party. The only monolith in this race is on the Republican side, and the energy is all on the Republican side. And so it's really hard when those two things occur. It's really hard to find a pathway for the alternative party, the challenger party, to win. But let's pay attention to what happens on the Democratic side, because if Bernie Sanders does well in Michigan, if Bernie Sanders does well in Missouri, the cakes would not have been baked yet. It's the Democratic nomination is still up in the air, and this next on Tuesday we're going to see did Joe Biden have staying power, and was the Bernie organizations in the states of Missouri and Michigan able to overcome the onslaught of the establishment Democrat class trying to dictate who should get the nomination. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think it's premature to talk about Trump Biden, because I don't know that it's going to be Trump Biden.
Yeah, we must also add that historically it's been very hard to knock off an incumbent. Some say that Obama should have lost in 2012, but he was an incumbent. It was hard to beat him. The last time it happened at Bush, a lot of people thought Bush should have lost in 2004, but it didn't happen. The last time it happened was George H.W. Bush, and the reason for that, I know you were there, is, there was a couple of reasons. First off, Clinton was really kind of stealing his talking points, and he was blaming inner city violence and the recession on HW. That worked, but also Bush had a third-party candidate who stole a lot of his votes, in Ross Perot, and the election was essentially stolen in '92.
Earned a lot of his votes.
That's true too. Yeah.
I supported George Herbert Walker Bush for president. But the fact is, neither candidate was providing the blue-collar voter an alternative. And they were saying take these global trade deals and like it. And there was a lot of pushback against that. And Ross Perot personified that pushback. So yeah, we had we were having the giant sucking sound being created during that election, and Bill Clinton signed it into existence shortly after that election. And Donald Trump's the one who closed the giant sucking sound and closed it off and to Mexico and Canada, and is working to close it off, the even bigger sucking sound that goes to China. And so there's only one guy in this race who actually understands how globalization has impacted middle America, and that's Donald Trump. Joe Biden hasn't figured out that there is a problem, that China poses a problem. He's still out living in some kind of dark age past, and Bernie Sanders doesn't care. So you get down to it, Donald Trump's the only one who's going to be in this race who's fighting like crazy to help the middle class, the people who work in factories, people who work with their hands, the calluses, people with calluses on their hands, and so when you get, you're going to have Bubba and Bobby Sue against Biff and Buffy, and that's not all that unusual. The Democrats, though, find themselves in what they consider to be an unusual position of being the candidates of Wall Street and the candidates of the Biff and Buffy, Biff and Buffy class, and all trying to dictate to everybody else what they should do, while Donald Trump is going to be the representative of Bubba and Bobby Sue, and people who work for a living and get their hands dirty, and people who work, have small businesses and are left behind by the kind of Sanders-Biden economic policies. So that's what we're going to see, and that's the battleground. And it's really a matter of who's running America. And for too long, in my estimation, the academic elites and their spawn have been running America, and it's time to put America back in the hands of the people who actually work for a living and have to use degreaser to get the dirt out from under their nails.
Yeah, I've been to elite academic institutions and got my degree from elite academic organizations, and I must tell you, the academic elite was highly overrated. That was my experience. I mean, really, it seemed almost like misinformed people. Maybe they were able to do some math tricks that I was not able to do, but man, I'll tell you, when it came down to what actually works out there in the real world, they just didn't get it. And so I think that's scary that a lot of these people do make the decisions.
Well, just remember, and this is kind of a closing point because it's esoteric, but almost everybody in college gets one book shoved down your throat, and the book is Plato's Republic. Whether you read it or not, you hear about it. And Plato's Republic, essentially, everybody thinks of it as being this great book on democracy because Plato was Greek and the like. But actually, Plato's Republic is ruling by the elites, and how elites need to be the rulers over the common man. And and how they will be, wise and wise rulers who are just, and so it's a complete fiction. But everybody who's in an elite university sees them as one of the rulers in Plato's Republic, and the rest of the people as the great unwashed who need to be ruled. And that's the kind of mentality. And the fact is, if you ask me, the people who are best to make these decisions, everybody gets one vote. But if I have to ask somebody what they think, I don't really need to hear from a graduate student from an Ivy League institution. I want to hear from an electrician who's going around talking to people and who can tell me, what people's attitudes are, and it can give me a sense of where people are at from a happiness standpoint, from a concern standpoint. Are they willing to pay to get stuff fixed or not? Those are the things that matter in terms of trying to figure out what policy is, because most people vote with their pocketbooks.
Yes.
And they vote with their feet. And the votes cast on election day are kind of an election vote, but by and large, the most important votes people make are the thousands of transactions that occur, actually the millions, hundreds of millions of transactions that occur every single year or every single day in this country. And that's the real voting that goes on. So, that's where we're at, Frank.
Before we wrap it up here, I just wanted to raise a point here. I was once taught that the best way to monitor the market and what's going on is to monitor 3M stock, because they make products that sort of reflect what's going on in the country. And I'm looking at it year to date. It fell a little bit in March, but it's back up. It's back up to 152.71 a share. Earlier in the year, it was about 180. It fell a little bit in January and February, but it's coming back up, so that's a good sign. I would rate that as a good sign for the Trump administration. 3M stock, good one to monitor.
Excellent. Well, I'll let you monitor that one. I'll watch my oil stock that continues to plummet because my wife is just beating me up over it. So anyway, that's but all in all, apart from that bad news, going back to the bonds, remember, those lower interest rates that are being driven because of people getting out of the stock market and trying to get flight to safety and buying U.S. Treasuries to save, both will have the effect of cutting the cost of our debt, which is good in terms of our deficit, and B, it provides you with an opportunity to refinance your debt or refinance your loan and without taking your home loan without applying it to debt, instead just cutting your overall costs. Your cost of living. So there is an opportunity for some people to benefit from this, and you should take a look at your own circumstance and see what makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rick. Yes, it's time to wrap it up. We wish everyone a great weekend, and the weather is getting a little bit better, so get out and enjoy it and don't catch the coronavirus. And yes, please subscribe we need you. We're trying to get up to 1,000. We're just over 950, so we're not too far from 1,000. We've grown about 100 subscribers since we started this podcast. We want to get more. The people need to hear these great words that we put out there in our minds. No, I'm kidding. No, these are very informed
Frank. Yeah, that's
thoughts.
exactly right. And with every subscription, I promise you that we're not gonna eat you for dough or money or anything like that. Well, but what you will get is automatic notification on these podcasts, so you know when they're coming up, and you can make a choice on whether or not to watch them or not. But at least you'll know they're available to you, and hopefully that. You'll get to like this formatting, and will choose to spend some time with us in terms of watching these things.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that, we thank you, and we will be out until Monday. So you have a safe Monday, and just in terms of coronavirus, just be cool, be prudent, and we will see you on Monday.
All right. Goodbye, my friends.